Welcome to Flipping the Table. Today, Michael speaks with Dr. Marion Nestle about her journey to nutrition, food politics, and food studies, and the state of the food movement after 3 decades at New York University, where she developed the nation's seminal food studies program and the first to offer advanced degrees in food studies using a humanities or social science lens, rather than the typical nutrition or food science curriculum. Dr. Nestle is likely the most important voice on the topic of food policy in the nation, and her contributions to awakening the nation to the need for food system change have been monumental. Enjoy the show.
In 2007, I received a copy of Marion Nestle's Food Politics: How the Food Industry Influences Nutrition and Health. This was the revised edition of a seminal book that altered the food movement because it shed bright light on the corporate control, or you might even say corruption, within the food system. Her book and its clear, engaging voice sparked my focus on policy rather than change strategies based only on market and farming practice solutions. And by 2011, Roots of Change began working on federal and soon after state policy campaigns. But the book Food Politics was only one of 12 that Marion has authored to educate her students and public on the link between food policy and human, pet, and environmental health. During her more than 30 years at New York University, Marion Nestle transformed a tired nutrition and hotel management degree program into the nation's most influential interdisciplinary food studies program, and it was the first to offer master and doctorate level degrees. What made Marion's program most unique was its use of history, culture, and policy to understand the importance of food in society. Her work there ignited a food studies field that now includes over 50 colleges and universities across the nation. Many of her students are now professors in these programs. Among the most fascinating aspects of Marion's life is what I see as her victory over the oppression that women have traditionally suffered professionally and in the academy. In her 2022 memoir, Slow Cooked: An Unexpected Life in Politics, she revealed her perseverance, her common sense, healthy ambition, and her love of the academic life. To me, she's a great example of how one emerges as a pioneer or a paradigm shifter. And I'm thrilled today to share my conversation with Marion Nestle. I know you'll enjoy hearing her story and her thoughts and where we are today in the effort to make our food system healthy for both humans and the planet. Let's begin. Welcome, Marion. Great to see you on this May Day. You're in New York in your office, beautiful office. Love those books behind you. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How about you?
Good. I'm great. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And with all the conversations that I do with folks, I always ask about their origin story. And as you know, I read Slow Cooked: An Unexpected Life in Food Politics recently. And it really reflects an interesting path to New York University and what eventually became the Department of Nutrition and Food Studies. So, I'm really interested in what the through line was or is that brought you to this place in your career.
It wasn't a very straight one. I started out, I was always interested in food, but there really wasn't any way that I could study it. I went to Berkeley as an undergraduate and was interested in food, and there were two choices. There was agriculture and there was dietetics, and I'm a city girl, so agriculture was out. I didn't get the whole agriculture thing until many, many, many years later. Now I get it.
Yes.
If I had it all to do all over again, I'd have been an agricultural economist.
Ah,
But
interesting.
I didn't do that. I instead signed up for dietetics. I lasted exactly one day. And it was clear that wasn't going to work. It was too home economicsy. It was too easy. It didn't seem challenging. The challenging part was the chemistry, and I became a science major. I thought, you should be in college to be challenged.
What a thought.
And it never occurred to me that the reason that these other things were public health was easy for me was because I was really interested in it. It just never occurred to me. It took me a long time to figure that out. So I graduated from Berkeley as a science major. I went on eventually to graduate school in molecular biology, and I was given a nutrition course to teach on my first teaching job. And it was like falling in love. That's the way I describe it. I thought, oh, this is such a wonderful way to teach undergraduate biology. And I never looked back. So that's what did it. And in between, in the events that I describe in the memoir, it was clear that I was not going to have a scientific career, because I had two small children and I just couldn't handle it. It was just too much. I couldn't do it. Something had to give. It wasn't going to be my children. So there went my scientific career. And so I took teaching jobs and started teaching nutrition, and eventually went back to school, got a master's in public health, went to Washington, edited the Surgeon General's report on nutrition and health, and got the job at NYU, where I came to chair a department of home economics. I mean, kind of funny to think about. And I thought, I've got a degree in molecular biology and I'm chairing a department of home economics. And my assigned task was to bring the department into the 20th, if not the 21st century. And eventually that happened when we invented food studies. And food studies was the program we all would have been in if it had existed.
Mhm.
I mean, we essentially created the program that we wished we'd had the opportunity to take, because it's interdisciplinary, and it combines absolutely everything. The faculty are trained in, I'm trained in science. Everybody else is trained in history, sociology, anthropology, economics, something completely different. Um, and we put together a program that worked, and I certainly flourished in it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think other people have too. But
Mhm.
that was the fluke. And there were landmarks along the way, personal ones, where I tell the story in the memoir about going to a meeting at the National Cancer Institute in the early 90s and watching slide presentations of cigarette marketing, and especially cigarette marketing to children. And I was perfectly aware that cigarette companies marketed to children. I had just never paid any attention to it.
Mhm.
The Joe Camel iconography was so much a part of the general landscape. It was absolutely everywhere. I didn't even look at it.
Mhm.
And what I learned at that meeting was that if you pay close attention to these things, you learn a lot about how cigarette companies market and why kids are smoking. And I walked out of that meeting thinking, oh, we should be doing the same thing for Coca-Cola. And I started paying attention. And that's
Mhm.
really what happened. That led eventually to my book, Food Politics,
Which we're going to get into. So
which
yeah, yeah,
will come out in 2027 in a 25th anniversary edition.
yes, that's exciting.
That's my
Yeah.
current project, is working on
Oh,
that.
good, good. I was going to ask you if you had something going on right now, a new book. So before we move on to food politics and the issues that emerge from that, the opportunities, the things that happened as a result of that book, I am very curious. I mean, you in Slow Cooked, you described the struggles, and you mentioned it in your opening here, of being a woman at that time. I mean, it was very difficult, it seemed to me, in reading what you wrote, that to be an academe was very difficult. The publisher perished when you have a bunch of kids. And at the same time, the feminism was starting to have an impact when you were beginning your career. You know, how did the emergence of feminism support you? And because in the end, it seems like you kind of had a victory over all of those oppressive things. You got out of it. You went beyond it. But
Yeah, but it
yeah,
took a
what was the
long
mix?
time.
What?
It took a really long time. I mean, that's why I called the memoir Slow Cooked. It
Hmm.
just took forever. Uh,
Hmm.
the when the feminist mystique came out in, I think it was 1963, I had just had my second child.
Hmm.
That book was revelatory for me.
Hmm.
I had read Simone de Beauvoir's
Hmm.
book, but it didn't register the same way that Betty Friedan's book read. I was in graduate school when the book came out. I had two small children. I was finding life extremely difficult
Yeah.
and not really understanding why. Um, and nobody really knew how to talk about these things, so there wasn't much conversation about it. It was just accepted that
Hmm.
women would do all of the child care and housework. And if you were doing something else, you were going to have to add that on top. That was just accepted to the point where, my husband at the time wasn't particularly helpful, but I never asked him.
Hmm.
I mean, I'll take some responsibility for that. I never asked him for help. It
Hmm.
was assumed that he was going to be working at whatever job he was working at,
Hmm.
and it was my job to deal with the household. Um, and and again, that was assumed and not questioned. And what Betty Friedan's book did was to make everybody question it.
Yeah, well, it seemed like you started. I mean, it seemed as you were, particularly after you came to NYU, you started to kind of say, "Hey, this is what I need, or this is what I want." Was that because the system was changing, the world was changing, there was a different consciousness?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was extremely unhappy in my particular life situation. I just couldn't manage it. And raising kids is difficult. And
Yeah.
it takes a lot of time,
Hmm.
and emotional energy, and then and I was in graduate school because I had very good advice from friends who said, you're bored, you're having a lot of trouble with this, you need to do something. Go to graduate school. And I picked molecular biology of all things, because I really liked, the most exciting class I had had as an undergraduate was with a professor in that department. And I thought if he was in that department, that's where the excitement was. And there certainly was a lot of uh, scientific excitement going on in molecular biology. And we're talking about the 1960s now.
Hmm.
Um, and, I liked it and I got a degree and, worked in it for a few years and then started teaching.
Hmm.
Um, but you know, the women's stuff was just part of what was in that was in the zeitgeist at the time. I tell the story about the guy who was hired um, at at the university I was working at, doing exactly the same job that I was doing, and he was paid a third more than I was. Um, because he was about to get married and they were planning to have kids. I already had kids.
Right.
And I was not married to the person I was living with at the time, but the assumption was that um, I wasn't going to need the money.
Yeah.
And I needed the money very badly. That was the one time in my life when my expenses exceeded my income, and it was a very disturbing
Yeah.
period of time. And eventually, I got the money. I made a big stink about it and got the money and did it quite gracefully, so I didn't get into trouble over it. But again, and that directly came out of the women's movement, because the way I found out about his salary was that a friend of mine who was in a women's consciousness raising group said, "Guess what my consciousness raising group talked about last night? Your salary at Brandeis University."
Wow.
What?
Yeah.
What? And it turned out his girlfriend was in that group and was horrified. that he
Yeah.
was getting so much more money than I was. And
Yeah.
we're talking about salaries that were very low in that at that time. I was getting $8,000 a year. He was paid 12.
Wow. It's
It was a
amazing,
long
isn't
time.
it?
It was a long time
The
ago.
world has changed.
The
The
world
world
has
has changed.
changed. The world has
Well,
changed.
this conversation reminds me of the fact, one of the things that I noticed early on, and maybe it was because when I started Rooster Change, some of the women who were part of the brain trust behind it and the foundations were all women. I really have noticed in the food space, in the food change space, in the movement space, a lot of women lead. There are a lot of women leaders in the food space. Have you experienced that? Do you see that in your world, in your
Well,
part of the world?
it's funny that you say that because Ms. Magazine had an article in it that said, "Why do men get all the credit for the food movement?" And the article was about, in specifically, Michael Pollan and Eric Schlosser, and I forget who.
Carlo, Petrini, they're all, yeah.
I mean, and they got the credit, and um, and I was very honored to be uh, mentioned as one of the overlooked women, along with Alice Waters. I don't
Mhm,
think Alice Waters is overlooked. I don't think
mhm.
I'm overlooked, but
Yeah, not now, not now.
but certainly, but in a way, yes, because I think given my I'm in a very small niche, and given the number of books that I've written and what's in them, I wonder if I were a man, if they would be better known. I don't know.
Mhm.
It's hard to know.
It is hard to know. It also, you're, I think, most famous for politics, and food policy issues. Although you've written a lot on nutrition and just guidance on books and pet food also. But so it is an interesting question. I do think that the policy realm is smaller, and there are fewer that follow it, and based on my what I see. But I would say at the farm level, at the advocacy level, there are a lot of women leaders.
Mm, right.
Yeah.
But they're in fragmented organizations.
Yes.
There are literally thousands of organizations, many of them led by women, but they're all competing for the same money, the same people, the same press, the same
Right.
whatever. And my big concern about the food movement is it's not consolidated. And
Yes, and we're going to get to that, but I want to talk about food politics first.
okay, let's
Um,
talk about food politics.
yeah, so that book originally came out in 2002. I think you did an additional printing in '03, but then
No,
you updated in
no.
'07.
There was
No,
another printing in 2007 and a third one in 2013.
13, right. I got it in 2007. I didn't see the first edition. I got it in '07. And it was a game changer. It put you on the map. The printings in China and Japan really revealed that the impact was international. It wasn't just in the US. And you know, I'm very interested in what you think made that book blow up at that time. That is, in terms of who started reading it, who started talking about it, who it influenced. What were the conditions at that moment that made that happen, and how has it changed, if it has, today?
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple of things preceding it. The Surgeon General had done a report on obesity in 2000. Eric Schlosser's Fast Food Nation came out the year before, and Michael Pollan's Omnivore's Dilemma came out the year after.
Yeah.
So I was sandwiched in between them,
Hmm.
and I thought I was just describing the obvious. I was talking in that book about how one of the big influences on obesity was food industry marketing and food industry's manipulation of policy to protect its interests, and how food companies are just in the business of selling food,
Hmm.
regardless of the consequences of that food. It never occurred to me that that was revolutionary.
Hmm.
Nobody was talking about it, or not very many people. Michael Jacobson
Yeah.
at
CSPA.
Center
Yeah.
for Science of the
Yeah.
Public Interest was talking about it, but really nobody else was.
Mhm.
And or and I was the impetus for writing it, well, there were several, but the main one was that I was really tired of going to meetings about childhood obesity and hearing speaker after speaker after speaker say, how are we going to get moms to feed their kids more healthfully? I
Mhm.
never heard somebody say, how are we going to get food companies to stop marketing junk foods to our kids and undermining parental authority around food? How are we going to do that? I wasn't hearing that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and so so I wrote that book, and that's what that book said. And
Mhm.
it must have struck a nerve because there was all this other stuff going on at the same time. And then
Yeah, there was kind of an explosion that
Yeah, and then
10-year
when,
period.
well, Omnivore's Dilemma.
Yeah.
I mean, Fast Food Nation was an enormous bestseller.
Yeah.
Omnivore's Dilemma was on the bestseller list for 130 weeks.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, Michael Pollan really knows how to hit
Mhm.
he's a very good writer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and, so it was in there, and I had no idea what kind of
Mhm.
an impact it was going to have. I certainly couldn't have predicted what happened, and I couldn't really see what was going on while it was happening,
Mhm.
except for the shocking thing that happened on Amazon the week before it came out, or a couple of weeks before it came out, which was this enormous concerted attack on the book before it had even been published and before anybody could possibly have read it.
Mhm.
Um, and it was a really tough attack. Hasn't she ever heard anything about personal responsibility? What's
Right.
she doing blaming the food industry when people make choices at the grocery store? It's up to them. So
Yeah.
the personal responsibility argument was there from the get-go. And
Mhm.
the attack, I heard about the attack from my editor who said, you have to do something about this.
Mhm.
This is going to kill your book if you've got zero, you have 1-star reviews, 3 1-star reviews on Amazon, and those are the only reviews. That's a big problem. You've got to do something.
Mhm.
And I thought, I don't think there's anything I can do. They said you have to get your friends to write reviews. I wasn't going to do that.
Mhm.
That's outside my ethical
Right.
framework. I mean,
You then you would be as corrupt as the
yeah,
companies.
I wasn't going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then I got rescued. I got rescued by somebody named Sheldon Rampton, who I never met,
Right.
said, if obviously this is these people were paid to do this.
Yeah.
And because they all sound the same and they're all being done in exactly the same way. And if somebody is doing this kind of attack on this book, it must be pretty good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. It kind of revealed, I mean,
Thank you.
it it was like the beginning of the revelation, I think, for people that there was a problem with the corporations and their approach to food.
Right.
Um, in light of what was being said about agriculture from others, it kind of made the whole picture clear, I think, for people in that time, because that, to me, in my view, there had been an organic and a natural foods movement before this, but there became a real food movement, a real effort to kind of think holistically about the food system in this period between 2002 2013. It's really blew up.
I have no way of assessing the impact of the book, but I do hear from people pretty regularly who said they read it when they were in high school or they read it when they were in college and it completely changed their relationship with food. So that's kind of exciting. If it has that kind of impact, that's wonderful.
Mhm.
And it's still in print and it still sells a few copies.
Mhm.
And there's going to be a 25th anniversary edition in 2027
And that is a
if I
great
can
thing.
get it written.
Uh-huh. You will. So let's talk about this. Do you think that the food industry is less influential now than it was before that book was written and before the movement kind of took off to change it? or has there been any progress? I mean, you also wrote a really good book in 2019, Unsavory Truth: How Food Companies Skew the Science of What We Eat, which really made clear, and you see the debate, it's with GMOs, it's with everything, about how science, how corporations are impacting science. I mean, do you think there's been any progress in terms of blunting that?
Well, it's hard to know. I mean, the food industry is in big trouble right now, and it's in trouble from four sources. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Says the food industry is poisoning America. Did he read Food Politics? I have no idea. I
Probably.
have really no idea, no way of doing that. GLP-1 drugs
Mm-hmm.
are influencing large numbers of people to eat less,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly to eat less of junk food.
Mm-hmm.
The whole definition of ultra processed foods and the effort to get people to reduce intake of ultra processed foods
Mm-hmm.
is having a big impact on the food industry because those are the most profitable foods in the supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
And inflation.
Mm-hmm.
Those four things are happening at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, the price of food has doubled within the last few years or a few months. It's astonishing what's going on. And so the food industry is really in trouble and trying to figure out how it's going to respond. And they're responding with mergers and acquisitions and getting rid of companies. And the really largest food companies are divesting of the things that seem least healthy. It's very hard to know how this is going to play out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the pressure on food companies from RFK Jr. to take the color dyes out, for example, will reduce sales of the most profitable cereals if they actually do it. And I've actually seen General Mills is now producing tricks with vegetable dyes, and they're brown and yellow, and they're brown and yellow.
Mm-hmm.
The things are, will kids want them? I don't know. Kids
Mm-hmm.
think that the brightly colored ones taste better.
Well, maybe it'll have to be the next generation of kids who didn't see that. That's probably what'll happen, right?
Yeah, I mean the colored ones are still on the market, so it's hard to know. But that transition looks to me like it's happening
Yeah.
or beginning to happen. Um, so I don't know. Did food politics have anything to do with that? I don't know. I have no way of knowing.
Well,
I
I'm sure it did. It was part of it did impact the zeitgeist. It did inform people. It did create people who became
Yeah,
advocates.
so, I mean, and states are passing laws
Yeah.
restricting
Yeah.
various kinds of things that food companies can do. I I mean, it's very hard to know with the Make America Healthy Again movement what is talk and what is action. There's a
Yeah.
real disconnect between the talk and the action.
Mhm.
Uh, so it's hard to know how this will play out.
Well, that kind of gets us into the next topic I want to talk about, which is about the food movement itself. You teach a food advocacy course, right?
Well, I
And
have taught it. I'm not
yeah,
now.
not right now. Okay.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it sounds like you believe there is a movement, but you said earlier it's too disjointed. So let's talk about its ability, the ability of people to actually affect change and the strength of a movement to affect change. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm looking at the MAHA movement, the Make America Healthy Again movement, with great interest because um, it seems to have amassed a large enough number of people focused on food dyes, chemicals in food, and other such issues to get RFK Jr. I know some people think that the MAHA movement got Trump elected and got Kennedy appointed. Um, whether it will stay that way or not, I mean, the MAHA movement failed on glyphosate, a big failure. I'm not sure they've won on color additives. That remains to be seen. And those are trivial in relationship to the really big issues. I think it's great to get the color additives out of the artificial dyes out of food, but is that the most important in making American kids healthy? No. The
Hmm.
most important issue is eating too much.
Hmm.
What are you going to do about that?
Yeah, the wrong
I think
foods.
the ultra processed food issue is more important because that's where the calories are.
Hmm.
And if you want kids eating more healthily, eating real food is an excellent message.
Hmm.
Um, and replacing ultra processed foods with real food is a really good thing to do, but I don't see any money behind it. And when I go visiting schools and talk to people in schools about eating real food, they say, how are we going to pay for it?
Yeah.
That's their big question is where's the money going to come from? It's going to cost more.
Hmm.
And the stuff that the Department of Agriculture supplies, I've had food service directors tell me they can't use it. It's so bad.
Hmm.
So I don't know.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it reflects choices, that is the choices that we're making as a country, like what are we seriously interested in changing. And I heard two things really. It's school food, really important, the food that is
Mhm.
fed to our kids. That's like, I mean, from what you said, is that the number one issue we should be focused on as a movement?
Well, it's an easy one. I mean, in some senses, it's an easy one because you would think that everyone would like their kids to have healthy food in schools. It's been so politicized that, that it's no longer the case. But I've visited a lot of schools, and the bottom line on schools is what happens in the cafeteria depends completely on who the people are who are in the individual school. You can only do so much with policy. The implementation of the policy depends on the individuals in the school. And if you want the food to be really good, you've got to have a principal who's for it, you've got to have a school food service director who's for it, and you've got to have teachers and
And you have to have the funds to buy the food.
parents. So I'm not even getting to that yet.
Okay.
The last school that I visited, which had a terrific principal and terrific teachers and a terrific food service director, couldn't get a supply chain that would get them the ingredients they needed.
Hmm.
And the principal showed me this rotten orange that one of the kids had been given that day. And you think, well, come on, everybody. I mean, the cost issues because the school food is the only place in a school that is expected to be self-supporting, and the reimbursement money from the Department of Agriculture has to pay for labor, salaries, cleaning, equipment, and the food and the food is an afterthought
Hmm.
in all of that.
Hmm.
So the amount of money that they give, which is $5 a meal or something close to that, only a fraction of that is for the food.
Hmm.
The rest of it has to pay for everything else. So that's not fair. And
Hmm.
if Kennedy wants schools to be serving real food, and I'm all for it, and not using ultra processed products, they've got to give them enough money to pay for it. And they have to build kitchens in a lot of schools.
Right. Well, and that's not even his department. That's USDA, right?
It's
So
all USDA, and it's not his department,
right.
although they blur these days.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he last weekend he was in Texas, promoting regenerative agriculture, and I'm very curious about the
That's also
relationship.
a blur.
Yeah, I'm really curious about the relationship between the two departments and the two leaders of those departments, what it's really like, if there's tension or if there is acceptance.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know anybody who's in the middle of that,
Hmm.
who's talking about it. It's a really good question.
Hmm.
Kennedy has said he wants mercury out of fish. Sorry, that's not his area because the EPA has already told the coal burning plants they can dump as much emissions as they want. So much for mercury in fish. And Kennedy failed miserably on glyphosate, which was something he's been trying to get rid of for ages.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and Trump did an executive order saying, "Oh, we need this."
right. Well, it shows the underlying problem to me. I'm curious if you agree. It's the power of capitalist corporations, a
Of
capitalist
course,
system.
yeah, of
So
course.
so when we really think about
Citizens United,
Citizens United is a real problem.
big
Um,
problem.
yeah. So this kind of gets me to my next question. If you were the queen of the nation's movement, or movements or people that are working in the food system to make change, what would you have them hammering on? What would you ask them to do?
You want to be realistic or theoretical?
I want to be theoretical and then
Let's
let's
be
do realistic. We
theoretical.
have time.
Let's do theory first. You have
Okay.
to overturn Citizens United and
Hmm.
get money out of politics.
Hmm.
I mean, we need to be able to elect people who are really interested in public health and public policy and public, and not corporate. And in order to do that, you have to have a level playing field financially so that candidates have the same amount of money to spend. And you can't dump hundreds of millions of dollars into a campaign to defeat somebody because you don't like their politics, which
Hmm.
is what we have now.
Hmm.
So I'd start with that. And then I want a complete reorganization of the agricultural system. So
Hmm.
instead of focusing on commodities, of which half are used to feed animals and the other half to fuel automobiles or airplanes, and I'm serious about that.
Yes, I
Half the
know.
corn is used for ethanol, half the corn um,
Animals.
is for animal feed, leaving a tiny fraction food for people. I would like an agricultural system that's focused on food for people.
Hmm.
Okay, we can feed animals too,
Hmm.
but that people are going to eat. But to have half of the corn and soybeans for biofuels, this makes no sense to me
Hmm. No.
and undermines the food system in a really serious way. That
And the environment.
and the environment and all the other consequences. So that I want universal basic income so people can buy food. I want universal school meals. So the ridiculous nonsense about holding families up because they can't fill out the paperwork
Yeah.
stops immediately.
Hmm.
Let's see, I'm sure I could think of others, but those are the main ones off the top.
Well, actually, that would be those would be really important. I want to ask you about one additional idea that's out there now. This whole idea of food as medicine, produce prescriptions, things
Mm.
like that as treatment and prevention measures.
Yeah, I'm not as interested in that because that depends on the healthcare system, and we don't have a healthcare system. Oh, let's throw that in too. Can we have universal single payer healthcare?
Okay,
Let's throw that in. Then we can talk about food as medicine. But unless we have that, we can't
because
because
it would just be
it's too
impossible.
individualized and it's
Yeah.
not sustainable. I mean, there are little programs that get grant money to do it, but if you don't have health, if you don't have a primary care physician who's involved in this, you can't do this.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, and we don't have a healthcare system. Oh, and
Hmm.
I'd like better public education too. Let's
Yeah,
let's put a lot of money into public schools.
yeah, yeah.
So,
That's.
so those are the things that I would change.
Hmm.
Healthcare, schools,
Hmm.
environmental stuff,
Hmm.
regenerative agriculture, the whole 9 yards.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
want all of that. So, okay, so those are theoretical. The question is, how do you go about doing that? Well, get out the vote,
Hmm.
protect voting rights,
Hmm.
run candidates who have some values and principles.
So it sounds like
Mamdani won in New York. I mean, it's possible.
you're saying that really the those who want to change the food system have to become a lot more political.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just changing personal behavior.
Yeah, and the problem we have is that most of these entities, mine included, depend on grant funding, and
Right.
the foundations don't want to be involved in policy work. I just had a meeting recently
Right.
in which the
Yeah,
first
because
question to me was,
they
"Oh,
moved
you're
this
going to be
thing.
lobbying." I mean, that was the first thing they said. We can't help you because you're going to be lobbying. No,
Yeah.
actually, we're not going to be lobbying. There's a lot of ways to impact policy without lobbying. And politics, lobbying has a place, but there's a lot you can do to energize people.
Yeah, I mean, I think personal responsibility is really important, but if personal responsibility is and Kennedy has said, we're not going to do any regulation, we're not going to do any legislation. He has said that. Whether it's true or not, we'll find out. Uh, but he has made those statements. And what he has said is, it's not our job to regulate. We're not a nanny state. We're going to educate. Well, if personal responsibility is what you're trying to change and education is what you're aimed at, you're not going to get very far. Education has never been enough
Yeah.
to
And
change,
people,
to
and that's just
change the world.
because, is that because of, well, when we're talking specifically about food, is that because of the addiction to salt, sugar, all fat, all those things
I
that
wouldn't even
impact
say
people's
it's
decisions?
addiction. It's because the entire food environment is set up to make people eat more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not Eating less is very bad for business.
Yeah.
And that, that's what I talk about in food politics is the food industry has created an environment that promotes eating more food. And they
Mm-hmm.
did that very deliberately and very effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I like to ask the question, why did the prevalence of obesity suddenly start to rise starting in 1980? What happened in 1980? Reagan got elected.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the consequences of that were enormous changes in the food system. It was a deregulatory environment, the introduction of the shareholder value movement, which is, that's the main thing that needs to change. The
Mm-hmm.
shareholder value movement is the movement that started in the early 1980s
Mm-hmm.
that made Wall Street evaluate corporations on the basis of immediate higher returns on investment and growth in profits every 90 days.
Right.
There's only so much food people can eat.
Yeah.
The companies can't keep growing. The only way they can grow is by getting you to eat their product instead of somebody else's, or to get you to eat more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they did, was they got people to eat more
Mm-hmm.
by putting food everywhere, by doing 2-for-1s, by making food by larger portions. Larger portions are a sufficient reason why
Mm-hmm.
people started eating more in the 1980s. And there's tons of evidence for increased calorie consumption in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
I had a doctoral student who looked at the size of the introduction of large portion sizes.
Mm-hmm.
And she could show that the number of places offering large portions increased in parallel with the rising prevalence of obesity. Well, that's no surprise. Calories
Mm-hmm.
in the food supply went up,
Mm-hmm.
and that those calories had to be sold.
So let's go back to what you said earlier, which I thought was really interesting about the struggle of the food industry now because of those four impacts.
Mhm.
So we're in this situation where we have too many calories of unhealthy food, UPFs, all that, and we have an industry that's struggling. So, is there a potential paradigm shift here, and what would trigger it? What would really drive it over the edge?
I'm not sure what you mean by driving it over the edge.
Well, what would
What
cause those companies to say, "Wow, we need a different business model"?
I think they're already dealing with that. I mean, so their immediate response is to reformulate.
Hmm.
Are reformulated ultra processed foods worth
Right,
buying?
right.
I don't know. Is removing a gram of sugar or a milligram of salt going to make any difference in a food product? I mean, what you want is you want people to eat real food. I mean, I'm with Kennedy on that one.
Hmm.
But then you have to make it possible for people to do that. And that means bringing home economics back into school, or certainly bringing teaching cooking. back into schools so that kids can learn how to cook. Because
Well, it reminds me,
you
you, what
can't
you
you can't deal with real food if you don't know how to cook.
Yeah, you're right. But it's funny. It kind of brought me back to Wendell Berry actually, and the unsettling
Mm,
of America. And because what I'm hearing from you is making me think about this huge challenge we have of the destruction of rural communities and agriculture as we understood it, and the
mm,
food supply as we have now based on really manufacturing. It's not really based on agriculture, it's based on manufacturing.
right.
So to get to a better system, there has to be some major revolutionary thing happen. And that seems scary in some ways for a lot of people, including people in rural communities.
Well, I mean, that's why I say we need a complete revolution in the agricultural system, to smaller and more regenerative farms, and that would repopulate rural America. I mean, what's happened in rural America is just shocking. You know, you
Shocking.
drive through these towns and they're dead
Yeah.
because there's
Destroyed.
no people there. The schools are closed, the movie theaters are closed.
Yeah.
The gas stations are closed. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And that's because there are no people there.
Right.
And removing the immigrants isn't helping that situation.
No, it is not. Uh,
And that means some sort of revolution in the way we deal with land, because I know lots and lots and lots of people who would like to farm. It's not that people don't want to farm. It's that they can't buy the land, they can't buy the equipment because they don't have the money. Um, and they need to make a living. And so somehow, and the system is set up so that small and medium farmers can't make a living.
mhm.
Uh, that
Well,
that's a system issue because the subsidies go to the wrong places.
yeah. And so that's another big change, probably. When you said reorganizing the food system, part of
Yeah.
that would be reorganizing the way subsidies work out of USDA. But this kind of, we're getting towards the end here. So I want to move us. One of the things I really liked about your book, particularly at the end, you talked about what keeps you going. You talked about teaching.
Mm.
Uh, and and your work, specifically in food studies, has led to 50 programs across the country. We know that between food studies, organic and sustainable agriculture programs, and nutrition programs, uh, and food systems programs, even there are like 250 programs in the
Oh
United
yeah,
States now.
easily,
Yeah.
easily.
So
Plus the environmental ones.
plus the environmental ones. So what do you? I mean, the hopeful side of you about the future, how does it relate to that expansion of this education?
Well, more and more people are interested in these issues. I mean, I'm fond of telling the story that when I wrote Food Politics and it was first published, the first question I got asked was, what does food have to do with politics? I don't get asked that anymore.
No.
It's pretty obvious, and there's been an enormous education of the public. It used, I would say 5, 10 years ago, I could not mention the word capitalism in class because it made the students so uncomfortable. Now, when I'm talking about the same issues, somebody in the class will say, aren't you talking about capitalism?
Mhm.
Well, yes,
Yes.
of course.
Mhm.
And the system has to change. It's gone too far.
Mhm.
There's not enough competition in the corporate world. There's too many industries. The food industry is way too consolidated. And the public is seeing this in the price issue.
Yeah.
We're seeing it. And so I don't know whether the current events will generate more, but there's certainly more talk. But, the Maha movement sounds like me a lot of the time.
Mhm.
Kennedy sounds like me. Even Trump sounds like me some of the time when
Mhm.
he introduced um, his nomination of Kennedy. He did it by saying he's going to fix the industrial food system.
Mhm.
Really? He
Mhm.
would.
Mhm.
And I wish, I'm very disappointed
Mhm.
that they're not taking steps to do what Kennedy promised to do,
Mhm.
but they're not.
Mhm. Well,
Mm.
You said something important earlier about the kind of not disintegration, but the lack of integration between all the people that are trying to work in the food system towards change.
Oh, yeah, it's
Um,
the biggest problem.
yeah, talk about that more. What are your, what do we do about that?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a real movement, social move, I mean, and there is a very large academic literature on social movements, a very large. I took a social movements course when I was an undergraduate at Berkeley, and when I teach advocacy, I'm really teaching about social movements. Um, and there's sort of rules about social movements. You have to have a common goal.
Hmm.
And the problem with the food movement, it doesn't have a common goal. It has hundreds of different goals having to do with food assistance, having to do with climate change, having to do with soil health, biodiversity. I mean, the number of labor issues, the number of issues, that they're all important. Every single one of them is an important issue. And there are literally hundreds of groups working on each one of these issues and thousands of groups across the country. You know, when people ask me, I want to do food advocacy, where do I start? I say, go do a Google search and get AI to identify the, and just search for food advocacy and type in the name of your community.
Hmm.
And they'll get 10 different, even in small towns, there will be 10 different organizations working on food issues. Some of them on food assistance, some of them, working on SNAP or WIC or food banks or, I mean, food distribution systems, food recovery systems. I mean, it's astonishing and each one has its own head who has to get a salary. If they have staff, that staff has to be paid. They're all competing for the same money.
Yeah, so here's the challenge that I see because I see the same thing. The issue is the food system is complex, and I mean your interdisciplinary program reflects the complexity of the food system. It connects to absolutely everything, basically. It's the
Mm.
underlying basis of civilization, food. So the question is, can you actually avoid that kind of complexity of the movement's many pieces?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that all of the anti-hunger groups, they're probably the best organized,
Hmm.
and they're not very well organized. I mean, there was an attempt to have a coalition, and there were about 300 organizations, to give you an example of how many there are. There were about 300 organizations in a coalition.
Hmm.
It started to get some muscle, and people didn't like it.
Hmm.
And there was a big pushback on it, and it was ended. Um, but these groups that are working on similar issues need to figure out a way to
Hmm.
consolidate what they're doing, to work together, so that they can get some political power.
Yeah.
Without political power, they're not going to get anywhere.
I will say that in California, we have been able to do some of that, and we've passed
Mhm.
healthy soils. We've got the nutrition incentive program that brings federal money because we can match it here. We have done some things in California,
Mhm.
but it did take a lot of organizing for many years of people.
Nobody said it was going to be
No,
easy.
it's freaking hard because, like you said, everybody's competing for the same dollar. So how do you collaborate when you're competing? It is a challenge, but I do think there are signs of it emerging in other places, a lot of other places, hopefully.
Certainly, the Latin American advocacy groups are really worth studying because they're fantastic. El Poder del Consumidor in
Yeah.
Mexico and
Hmm.
ACT in Brazil
Hmm.
and the groups in some of these other places where
Hmm.
they are collaborating, where you have an advocacy group collaborating with academia and
Hmm.
collaborating with lobbyists. So
Hmm.
you bring all these people together, each of them doing their own component around common goals. They've
Right.
done really well.
Yeah.
Now, we don't seem to be able to do that well in
America, individualism. It's a
America.
problem.
That's America. We're Americans. We don't do that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we're at the end of our time. Marion, it's been a great pleasure. Always interested in what you have to say and inspired by your life's journey and what you've done for all of us who care about food systems and health. And so thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. And I know I'll be seeing you again.
I hope soon.
Yeah.